If Joe Biden gets elected president of the United States, what does that mean for America exactly?
Well, I can tell you what it means for your religion. It means choice. It means that you're going to put a radical lefty on the court, and that's going to be the end of pro-life. It won't even have a chance. So that's what it means. Nobody's been more pro, as you know. You've heard it many times. I think you might have said it yourself, but nobody has been more pro-life as president than I have.
We'll see. I think the Supreme Court this week is going to have its first major ruling come down on abortion. And I got to tell you, there's already a lot of concern about the conservative legal project, you could call it. There are a lot of folks who are saying, hold on a second. So even when we have a Republican president who's picking judges that the Federalist Society says this is the best we can do, the best we've got in America, we still get wildly unconstitutional rulings, policymaking from the Supreme Court bench. And that's something that we now are seeing on major issues. If we see this on abortion, I've got to say that's going to be a big challenge for the president, because judges were a part of the bargain, and Trump kept his end on this one. I will say that I do not. Trump has put the judges forward that people who all they do in life is study the best, most constitutionally sound legal minds possible and put them forward. The Federalist Society, Trump has gotten through the judges that he was supposed to, and he kept his word on that. And people need to be honest about this. And it still doesn't matter. It still hasn't meant that everything is, that the major issues are being decided in a way that conservatives would be aligned with. And this is not about politics. It's about the Constitution. I know we don't want to turn the Supreme Court into a super legislature, but it is a super legislature. And so at least we can hope that on clear textual issues, on clear issues of this is what the law says, the conservatives on the court will actually treat the law as the law and not make something else up instead. But that's not what's happening. So I have concerns about that. And especially if we have a bad decision come down here on an upcoming abortion case, maybe the evangelical vote is a little bit suppressed as a result. Maybe some Christians that are a little sick of some of the. And look, I think that voting for Joe Biden is obviously insane and a terrible idea. And I don't understand how you can be a believing traditional Christian and think that what Joe Biden stands for, just when you look at the issue of abortion, is something that you could ever support. But people come up with all kinds of justifications for these things. The good news for our side, it's not great news, but the good news is that Joe Biden is a really bad candidate. That Joe Biden is not someone who anyone is inspired by. No one believes that Joe Biden is great. Even Biden supporters, even the people that work around Biden. No one thinks he's a change the game kind of a candidate. No one thinks that he's going to be bringing things to the table that are going to make enormous positive strides for this country. No, not at all. He's a puppet. The problem is that's perfect for the Democrats. That's what they want. Joe Biden is the empty vessel through which they plan on pursuing the most radical and left-wing policies imaginable. And that's why Maggie Haberman, who is a New York Times reporter, Maggie's not supposed to say this stuff. Maggie said something that got her into quite a bit of trouble by just stating, and this isn't like, she's done this great analysis or, so brave from Maggie Haberman, New York Times White House reporter. No, she just said, look, Joe Biden's not a great candidate. We all know it, right? Oh, my gosh. You're not allowed to work at the New York Times and say anything other than Joe Biden is the greatest candidate in the history of candidates. He's amazing and he's fantastic. And why don't you see this? That's right. Joe Biden, not allowed to say it. Producer Brandon, play clip 11, please.
Joe Biden is still a very flawed candidate. He is running a flawed campaign so far. There are still 4 months left. They have to have what are supposed to be 3 general election debates. 4.5 months ago, we were not talking about the coronavirus the way we are talking right now. So a lot can happen. And I do think it is important to remember that at the end of the day, elections are still binary. And people, if they decide to vote, unless they decide to write someone in, are going to make a choice between these two men. And there are going to be a lot of people who, even if they are unhappy with Donald Trump right now, there will be people who still decide to vote for him in the end. It is a real mistake for anybody to start calling the election today.
Yep. That's the most straightforward, Captain Obvious analysis of politics right now you could ever imagine. Right? Joe Biden is a weak candidate. We all know it. Yeah, Trump's in trouble right now politically, but things can change with the economy. Things can start to look better. And at the end of the day, it's going to be Biden or Trump. So don't start popping the champagne corks quite yet, libs. This is what Maggie Haberman's telling them, and she's among the elite journo libs. She's one who you would think would be able to say things that are true, that are true and obvious about the Democrats' candidate, but nope, not allowed. Unacceptable. So that then takes that then shows you what we're all facing here. That shows you that they can't even have a very straightforward conversation about American politics without people getting very upset. Very upset. And now there's one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and that is how exactly the left continues to expand its coalition of interests and to use identity politics to its advantage. What are the ways that they try to use what was started as this Black Lives Matter movement and then has been expanded much more broadly into all these other left-wing causes? They need some philosophy behind all of this. That's not Marxism. That's not socialism. At least they can't be open about that. That is the ideology, but they have to come up with other things. And so some of the younger, more radical members of Congress, like AOC, end up becoming the thought leaders of the left-wing movement here, which I know, AOC, thought leader, a fascinating thing to say. Here is AOC on, well, I'll let her speak for herself, and then we'll just work through this for a moment or two. Play clip 4.
And now that you talk about race, what do you think the Latinx community should do to stop racism among them and among other races?
Yeah, well, the first thing that's so important is for us to talk about racism within our community and how we fit both, how we are both impacted by racism in the United States and across the world, but also how it exists within our own communities. And, a lot of times I'll hear people say, okay, this is about Black Lives Matter. What about Latinos? And I always say, Latinos are Black. we are Afro-Latina, and we run an entire racial spectrum. And so we have to have conversations around colorism, and we have to have conversations about the African and indigenous roots from which we come and how that's reflected in systems of power, wealth inequality, and frankly, our political system.
Okay. Let's unpack this a little bit. Some people from the Latin American world are Black. That is true. To say Latinos are Black, and a lot of conservatives, I saw this on social media, jumped on this. Okay, she was speaking in broad. Look, I'm not somebody who just pretends that people say dumber things than they do. She's speaking in broad terms, and there's truth to this. Obviously, anyone who has any familiarity with the Cuban population, for example, knows that there are people who are very light-skinned and fair-haired who are Cuban, and there are people who are very dark-skinned who are Cuban. And so she's talking about what she refers to as colorism here. But see, I think what's fascinating is that when you start to look at the left and this issue, race is so much more complicated, even than the left-wing theorists are willing to tackle as an issue, because, if you're looking at race globally, there's racism all over the world. There's racism within societies where it's not about anyone who is racist against people of African origin. It is truly just a skin color, a skin color racism, right? People who are darker in parts of South and East Asia are looked down upon in a form of racism by people who are of the same nationality but aren't as dark. So there are so many different ways that you can look at this and approach this issue. And then you want to ask questions. You want to say, well, hold on a second. Then is someone facing greater racism because of the darkness of their skin color, or is it more about their nationality, their identity? These are things that are in, I actually do find this interesting, and the left is going to eventually have to tackle this issue in a way that I think is not really going to be very coherent. And this is why racial politics eventually becomes, it's so clear that it's so divisive, because we're all a mix of different things, right? She's saying the Latinx, which is now what they call the Latina community. The Latinx community is black. Well, there are black people in the Latina community, but there are people within many communities that have lots of different ethnic origins, and how they identify as a racial categorization is often much more complicated than what you can write or what you can say in one word. And so then aren't we heading toward a world where we understand that these issues of like someone's race is so unimportant to what anyone, it's irrelevant to how in a free society of decent people we view each other. So why are they always focusing in on it instead of understanding that we all have a complicated history of where we come from in our past, and so we're just Americans? Well, it's a very important moment in American politics, and it's a time when we should look to those who have been in these fights before and been successful in these fights before. And with that, I bring you Mr. Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House. He's got a book out now, Trump and the American Future, Solving the Great Problems of Our Time. Mr. Speaker, great to have you on, sir.
Well, I'm delighted, and it's always fun to be with you, and I'm very excited by my new book.
Yeah, please tell us about this, because right now, I'm just gonna say it, Mr. Gingrich. It feels to me like Trump is not, the movement and the momentum is not where I want it to be right now. It feels a little stalled out. What has to happen here to get Trump moving again and the movement moving again?
Well, I think in Trump's case, first of all, he's got to keep focusing on economic growth. If he gets the economy growing again, he'll be in dramatically better shape than if it's still in the doldrums. He doesn't have to get back to where it was in February, but people have to have a sense by September that things are happening, that it's going better, and that they can see that his strategy by next year will make us prosperous again the way we were back in February and January.
And so, go ahead, sir.
So, second, I think he has to explain clearly what a victory for Pelosi, Schumer, and Biden would be like, and what their policies would be like, and why that would be totally unacceptable to the country. And I think if he does it correctly, it'll be amazingly effective, because the truth is their policies are basically so far to the left they're crazy.
Now, in the book, the subtitle, Solving the Great Problems of Our Time. If you could sit down with this president and have one problem that you would dive into with him that you feel like this is central, essential, and one from which so many others would either be solved or other issues would go away, let's say, what would it be? I mean, if you could get the president to get focused in on one thing right now, other than obviously just getting the economy up and running, I mean longer term, structurally, given what we see in this country.
It would be education. I mean, we have the fourth most expensive school system in America is Baltimore. They have entire buildings in which not a single student can pass the state exam. Not one. Now, that means they're not going to be able to read and write. They're not going to be able to get a job. They're not going to have a decent future. They're going to end up in jail. And until we solve the problem of our education system, everything else is going to remain screwed up. And we're never going to compete with the Chinese if we keep producing thousands and thousands of people who can't do anything. So in my mind, the deepest crisis in the United States today is the absolute breakdown of its education system. which comes in two forms. One is among poor children, they don't get K through 12 very effectively. And among wealthy children, they're being taught junk. I mean, I do a newsletter that's free at Gingrich 360, and I did one recently on 3 generations of brainwashing. I mean, you got people out here who are being taught stuff that's just false.
We're speaking to former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. He's got a new book out, coming out right now, actually. Trump and the American Future, Solving the Great Problems of Our Time. Mr. Speaker, have you ever thought even, I know you're seeing what we're all seeing too about the statues and the desecration of so much of our shared culture as Americans and history and heritage and just all the things that are, Columbus statues, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all these things now are being attacked and destroyed. How do we turn this around?
Tell the truth about it. These people are barbarians. When the Taliban destroyed 2 great Buddhas, one was 120 feet tall and the other was 170 feet tall, the entire world condemned them because it was so obvious, that what they were doing is crazy. Well, this is crazy. When people who claim they care about civil rights deface the statue in Boston of Colonel Shaw, who organized the first free black regiment in the Union Army in the Civil War, they're showing you that they're ignorant and they're barbarians and they're hateful. And the correct answer, I think, is what Trump just started down the road to do, which is make sure that it's a crime and lock them up. I mean, if we don't have the courage to stand up for our own civilization, we should not expect it to survive.
And why is it that we don't hear more about how this is a Democrat movement? I'm trying to get people away from using these, yelling about how they're socialists and they're leftists. And those are true, and I use those terms as well. But these are Biden voters that are pulling down the statues, quite obviously.
I thought the president began to hit on it in Tulsa Saturday night when he made the point, when you look at the big cities, every single big city that is a disaster has been run by Democrats for generations. They have had the mayor's office in Chicago for 9 decades, but they want to blame us. Biden has been in Washington for 48 years, but he wants to blame us. Baltimore had its last Republican mayor 56 years ago. Pelosi's father and Pelosi's brother were both mayors of Baltimore, but they want to blame us. We have to have the guts to stand up and say, if you want to change something, you'd better start by changing parties. And we ought to go into a place like Chicago, which is a disaster. I mean, a human disaster. 18 people killed 2 Sundays ago. The bloodiest Sunday since 1950. And yet, does Black Lives Matter care that these are all blacks? This last weekend, a 3-year-old child was killed. And where are the liberals? Where are the protests? Where's the concern? Oh, it's not politically correct. Well, I think we ought to have the courage to fight it. And to say flatly, these people are failures. Their policies are failures. And this is where, frankly, I like Trump. And Trump has the guts to stand up against the entire national establishment and say what needs to be said.
The book is Trump and the American Future, Solving the Great Problems of Our Time. Author is former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Gingrich, always great to have you on, sir. Best of luck with the book, and we'll talk to you again as the election gets closer.
All right. Talk to you soon.
It is indeed roll call time, everyone. Thank you for sending in all of your thoughts. We always appreciate it. Facebook.com/Buck Sexton. TeamBuck@iHeartMedia.com if you want to email. And if you want to call in, because we love the voicemail stuff too, 844-900-BUCK, 844-900-2825. That's right. That's how we want it. So please do leave us a nice voicemail. Keep it to less than 45 seconds, and we'll have some of those ready for you later on this week. Less than a minute is fine, but 30 to 45 seconds is the sweet spot for the voicemails. If you leave a 6-minute voicemail, producer Mark is just not that patient, and neither is producer Brandon. Don't leave a 6-minute voicemail, please, because you're just going to be speaking and no one's going to hear it past a minute because they're going to delete it. All right, Ryan. Hey, Buck, was listening to the show the other day. You were talking about New York State and their ludicrous gun laws. I'm a fellow New Yorker and a gun owner. I recently took an interest in obtaining a pistol permit. There's all kinds of crazy stuff in my county, Schenectady, to jump through. Wanted to share my story. Yeah, man, look, thank you for sharing this with me. I appreciate it. I know that this is a real challenge, and I think actually I might have even read this particular roll call from you in the past. So I just, as I realize that right now, I might have had an issue with that. So, but thank you anyway. It's important. Tim writes, "What's happening, Buck? Do you think the bloodthirsty activist will ever catch up to Ralph Northam and his blackface photo? He's not even sure if he's the one of the blackface or the Klansman hood. To me, that either means he's dressed as both before, or at least wouldn't put it past him to do so. Buck, your siren song of liberty really scratches where I itch." Shields high, buddy. Well, Tim, I'm happy to scratch where you itch, my man, with the Freedom Hut. As for Northam, no, Northam is a Democrat. It's going to be fine. You know, Jimmy Kimmel just released today a somewhat, here, I might even be able to pull it up. He released something that was meant to make the problems of his past go away. And here's what it is. It's a statement about how Jimmy Kimmel used to appear in a sketch in blackface. And here's what he wrote. "I've long been, remember, Jimmy Kimmel's a not funny but very highly paid late night comedian. He's really just a political commentator who doesn't read books, but there's a lot of those, with jokes written for him. Ha, ha, ha. Anyway, I've been reluctant to address this as I knew doing so would be celebrated as a victory by those who equate apologies with weakness. I apologize there's nothing more important to me than your respect, and I apologize to those who were genuinely hurt. On KROQ radio in the mid-'90s, I did a recurring impression of the NBA player Karl Malone. I continued impersonating Karl Malone on TV. We hired makeup artists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've also done impressions of famous people, including Snoop Dogg, Oprah, Eminem, Rosie, and many others. In each case, I thought of them as impersonations and nothing more. Looking back, many of these sketches are embarrassing. I believe I have evolved and matured over the last 20 plus years. I hope that's evident to anyone who watches my show. I know that this will not be the last I hear of this, and it will be used again to try to quiet me. I love this country too much to allow that." Oh, thank you, Jimmy. So you get to continue to have a platform and be a millionaire because you love this country too much to be silenced. And you're a leftist anyway. You're a lib, part of the lib mob. So it's not, what bravery are you speaking out on? But yeah, my summer vacation isn't planned for more than a year and includes the next 2 summers off as well. I'll be back to work in September. Jimmy Kimmel. Yep, he's fine, folks. Jimmy Kimmel is fine for his blackface sketches back in the day and his impersonation of a black man. I can assure you, a conservative who did either of those things would be canceled. And I mean actually officially canceled from their platform, like fired, as well as get in all kinds of trouble in the public square and kicked out of the public square. That's what would happen. Double standards, the only standards libs have. I don't know who said that first, but it's a phrase that stuck with me. It's true. Kevin, Buck, I'm encouraging all my neighbors in Colorado to fly the American flag every day until the leftists are subdued. Be the not-so-silent majority and begin pushing back by demonstrating respect, appreciation, and admiration for the flag. We have to start somewhere. We have to push back until they break. Also, we need more Governor Cuomo from you. Hilarious. Shields higher than ever. Kevin, what do you mean you want to put a flag up? If you're going to put a flag on your house, you got to have a lot of questions. How big does the flag have to be? And why are you going to just limit it to one flag? Why not do several flags? And when you have all the flags together, it's like you're having a party of flags. And one flag can say, bring the potato chips. Another flag could show up and bring the beer. And then when you add all of this together, that's, yeah, you get it. That's Governor Cuomo being Governor Cuomo, doing his thing. I forget oh yes, flags. That's right. Push back against this, put American flags out there. Yeah, look, I agree. I was looking at, I'm very interested in real estate and think that's a place where people can build some security for themselves over time. Your home is a very important investment, and it's funny because every time I see a house on the market that has an American flag in the initial photos of it, I'm like, I kind of like this place. It's automatically, I have a more positive view of the home, I think, than I would otherwise. I'm not saying it has to be like a huge, 20 by 20 flag from a giant pole out front, but just a little American flag on the porch or something. I'm like, I think I could live in this house. Yeah, I like it. So I'm all about the flag. I've got a flag right here. I mean, we've changed the set for the first, but I've got an American flag that I have in my home, and I actually want to get a bigger one. The thing is, I already have one flag that's displayed in my home, but I want to have a bigger. I want to have one that has some history to it. I want a flag that has some story behind it. I don't know. I think it'd be a cool conversation piece. Anyway, let's go to Eliza. Hello, Buck. I've been listening to you for a few years, and after a friend introduced me to your podcast, your show... Wait, Eliza, can you please thank your friend for passing the buck? I know I say this so often on the show, but this is how the show keeps getting bigger every month. And it's important because there are more podcasts. Everybody and their great Uncle Phil has a podcast these days. I mean, everybody's coming out with podcasts. And it puts pressure on the business, because this is a business and I am a capitalist. It puts business pressure on the business of podcasts because, with more and more, the advertisers expect more and more people to be downloading, or else they're going to be looking elsewhere, right? So whatever the floor is for a certain advertising campaign goes up with more and more podcasts. Now they've got all these shows that are big news brands. They put out a podcast or whatever. So it's getting to be a very crowded space. I do think Trump should do a podcast. I don't know why he hasn't yet. I mean, all these other congressmen are doing podcasts. I feel like Trump should do one. Kind of wish the members of Congress would focus more on legislating, but, to each his own. But I think Trump should have a podcast. But Eliza, I'm sorry. Obviously, this is... I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. This really strikes a chord for me because I really... People always ask, how can I help, whatever. I'm like, look, if you believe in this show, if you believe in what we're doing here, the two most important things you can do are check out and support our sponsors, because they track every single one of you who buys anything or signs up for anything that we're promoting on this show. It's like a vote. It's like you're voting for the show to stay on the air. And I only have great products and companies that share our values and are great people on this show. And then passing the podcast to one person. I'm sorry to take up your time sort of doing a commercial for the show within the show. But like I said, if everyone just got one person, if every podcast listener got one person in their life to also download and listen to this show, we would be absolutely crushing it within a month. I mean, we're already doing really well. A lot of people listen to the show, but I mean, it would be one of the biggest podcasts out there. Eliza said it's a spa for the mind. Thank you. My intellectual retreat from a crazy, illogical world, especially these last few months. I work in emergency services. You and Tucker Carlson are national treasures. Yours and Tucker's show keeps me warm and fuzzy at night, and I pray for your safety and health every day. Shields high from West Palm Beach. Well, Eliza, thank you so much. West Palm, producer Mark and I talk, West Palm may be where the Freedom Hut relocates. So, you never know. West Palm, I hear great things. A little bit of great things. A little bit. So thank you for listening down there, and please spread the word. And the roll call continues, my friends. So let's get back in. Remember, Facebook.com/Buck Sexton, Team Buck at iHeartMedia.com. And with that, we go to Kyle. And he says the following. Buck, I read the court's opinion for Bostock v. Clayton County because I think it's important to read such things for oneself and not rely on the opinion of radio hosts or TV pundits for piecemeal regurgitations. No offense intended to you. I've even read Scalia's book on textualism, so I understand what he meant by it. That being said, when I read Gorsuch's opinion, I found myself saying, okay, this makes sense. Maybe he got this one right. But then I read Alito's dissent and thought, never mind, Gorsuch's opinion is trash. This is real textualism. It's like watching a pretty good high school player practice and then seeing him get demolished when Michael Jordan steps in the court for some one-on-one. Alito is the heir of Scalia. Gorsuch risks becoming another busted draft pick like Roberts. Libs always fall in line. conservatives sadly fall apart. Sadly, Kyle, I think you're correct. And I'm glad that you go to the source yourself. And certainly that's, for one who has the time and inclination, that's certainly the best thing to do on these Supreme Court cases. Travis, I fear you are right. We can no longer hunker down and hope the leftist firestorm will burn itself out. They will tear down the hard-fought freedoms that we take for granted if we do not come out of hiding and act. What do you propose a lowly citizen do? I will fight in a righteous war if it comes down to that, but we are not like our opponents. They are not constrained by a sense of decency and fairness. What do decent people do other than vote and give moral and financial support to conservative voices? Your diagnosis of the problem of tearing down hard-fought freedoms is correct, and that we can't all hide. That's also correct. I mean, I think we are in an ideological war, and I think we should do everything we can and everything we should to make sure that that's all that it is. You know, we don't want this to become an actual contest of violence in any way. That would be terrible for the country, terrible for all of us. This is the most beautiful, freest, wealthiest country in the history of the world. Let's just keep what we've got, you know? But I understand that there's also a real fear, real concern that the left is willing to go to any lengths, any extremes right now to get its way. And, you know, I will say this. I do have real fear that they may, I mean, if you have a Biden administration and unified Democrat control of the executive branch and the legislature, you may have a situation where they start coming for people's guns. And that's when that I think is the red line that the federal government needs not cross. I do have concerns about that. That would get very ugly very quickly. But we'll see. And in terms of what every person can do, what do decent people do other than vote and give moral and financial support to conservative voices? Well, if you do that, you're doing a lot, Travis. So, and that's more than plenty of people are doing. So don't just discount supporting voices that are out there, supporting causes that matter to you, putting your money where your heart is, and voting, and just be a force for good. If you're a force for good in society right now, your politics are inherently conservative, even if you don't care about politics. If you pay your bills, treat people with respect, treat them with kindness, let people have their say, act like a mature adult, you are contributing to the vision of the conservative America that I try to promote, for example, on this show every day. So we all make choices that affect this. And so we're all, in a sense, combatants in this great battle for the soul of America. But you are fighting for our side by being an honest, decent, kind, thoughtful, courageous, virtuous, dependable human being, American, every day. You are contributing to our cause by doing those things. You know, you're not out there, I hate everybody and tear everything down and everything's terrible and everybody's racist and everything's horrible. No. And that's important. It really is. Tina, hey, Buck, it has been 5 years since Governor Haley removed that flag. Now look, our history is being wiped clean, from George Washington to Francis Scott Key. Republicans are cowards. I fear no one in Congress discussing a federal bill to stop this madness except our president. Instead, they agree we should change the names of our bases, not knowing the North extended a reconciliatory hand to the South and allowed us to name them. Watch and see. West Point will be next. This solves absolutely nothing, since this is clearly a communist movement. Tina, you are correct that this is a Marxist revolutionary moment in American politics. That's what they're pushing. That's what the Democratic Party ultimately wants. So you're correct in that diagnosis, and this will only get worse unless we fight back, unless we push back. And I think that's why so many of you are listening to the show, because you know that's what I'm trying to do. Robert, Buck, I've been with you since Real News days. Yeah, Robert. Woo! Original Real News Squad. We'll make up a new term for that. Do you think the president will drop the ridiculous one China policy and officially recognize Taiwan as an independent nation? Robert, the answer is no. I don't think he will do that. That would be the Chinese. I don't want to even know what they would do in response to that, because it would be that's a big, big red line for the Chinese Communist Party. And now I'm not saying that Trump shouldn't do it, because, it would send quite a message. But I don't think Trump's going to do it. Too risky, too high stakes, especially given all the other things going on right now. Terry, hey, Buck, if the government eventually moves into Seattle to clear out the CHOP, why wouldn't they have already moved into Chicago with the astronomical number of ongoing weekly fatalities? I just don't understand at all. Well, Terry, Chicago doesn't have an autonomous zone that says no police can go in. So that's why it wouldn't be a case of federal action, perhaps even under the Insurrection Act. But yes, the violence in Chicago is terrible. David, I find it very unsettling that someone like Bolton had influence in the Trump administration. It seemed that he had an unbalanced, power-mad Dr. Strangeglove scenario, and the book doesn't help. Only the ravings of a self-appointed gilded Trojan horse with a mustache. David, indeed. Oh, that's so cute. Tallulah just sneezed at the end of the show. You might have heard that. Hi, Tallulah. David, you're correct about Bolton. Captain Mustache, not a good dude. That's the show for today, team. Please pass the buck. Until tomorrow, shields high.